Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into a topic that's more tense than a staring contest between a hawk and a cobra in a phone booth. The top countries that have a frosty, to put it mildly, relationship with North Korea. Now you might be thinking, John, isn't North Korea on everyone's bad side? And you wouldn't be entirely wrong. But some countries take issue with North Korea's antics more than others. From nuclear weapons to human rights violations that would make a dictator blush, we'll explore why these nations stand against North Korea with the same enthusiasm I reserved for finding a perfectly ripe avocado. So, buckle up, buttercups, because things are about to get internationally awkward. Let's start with the obvious, shall we? South Korea. Imagine living next door to someone who routinely threatens to turn your vegetable garden into a radioactive crater. That's South Korea's reality. Since the Korean War, these two have been locked in a staring contest with higher stakes than a game of marbles at a retirement home. North Korea's military provocations, which are about as subtle as a mariachi band in a library, don't exactly scream good neighbor. And then there's the whole nuclear tests thing. Look, I'm all for scientific advancement, but detonating nukes is less exploring the atom and more poking a hornet's nest with a radioactive stick. So yeah, South Korea has a few good reasons to be wary of its northern neighbor. In their shoes, I'd invest in a really good fence. Ah, the United States. The self-proclaimed leader of the free world and, let's face it, the world's most enthusiastic participant in a good geopolitical standoff. With its vast military might and global influence, the US often finds itself stepping into conflicts, whether invited or not. They've been side-eyeing North Korea for decades, and the feeling is very much mutual. The two nations have been locked in a tense standoff, each wary of the other's next move. It's like that awkward family reunion where everyone's pretending to be civil, but you can feel the tension thicker than gravy on a cold day. The atmosphere is charged and everyone is on edge, waiting for the next spark to ignite. The main issue? Well, aside from the whole threatening to nuke everyone thing, the US is deeply concerned about North Korea's aggressive posturing and unpredictable behavior. Isn't too keen on North Korea's, shall we say, relaxed approach to human rights. The regime's treatment of its own people is a major sticking point for the US and its allies. It's like they read the Geneva Conventions as a list of suggestions and not particularly good ones at that. The international community watches in dismay as North Korea continues to flout these fundamental principles. So, what's Uncle Sam been doing about it? Well, there's the sanctions, which are essentially the international equivalent of putting someone on timeout. These measures aim to pressure the regime into compliance by hitting them where it hurts economically. Except this timeout involves limited access to luxury goods and international banking. The sanctions are designed to isolate North Korea financially, making it difficult for them to fund their military ambitions. Not exactly a walk in the park, but also not quite enough to deter a regime that seems to thrive on defiance. North Korea's leadership remains resolute, often using the sanctions as propaganda to rally domestic support. Then there's the whole leading international efforts to isolate North Korea thing. The US works tirelessly with its allies to present a united front against the regime's provocations, and of course we can't forget the unwavering support for South Korea. The US maintains a strong military presence in the region, conducting joint exercises and providing a security umbrella. The US has their back, like a heavily armed, slightly overprotective older sibling. This commitment reassures South Korea and sends a clear message to North Korea about the strength of their alliance. Next up, we have Japan, a country that knows a thing or two about holding a grudge. With a rich history and a culture deeply rooted in honor and memory, Japan has a long-standing tradition of remembering past grievances and ensuring they are not forgotten. And when it comes to North Korea, well, let's just say they've got a list of grievances longer than the scroll of grievances in A Christmas Story. The tension between these two nations is palpable, and it manifests in various ways, from political protests to public demonstrations. High on that list, North Korea's nuclear program and its penchant for lobbing missiles around like confetti at a parade. These missile tests are not just a show of strength. They are a direct threat to the safety and security of the region. Look, I get it. Everyone likes a good fireworks show. The dazzling lights, the booming sounds, it's all part of the celebration. But when your fireworks have the potential to wipe out entire cities, it kind of takes the fun out of it. The stakes are incredibly high, and the consequences of such actions are dire. And Japan, being geographically closer to those fireworks than most, has every right to be a bit on edge. The proximity means that any miscalculation or intentional act could have devastating effects on Japanese soil. Imagine living next to a neighbor who celebrates every holiday by firing a shotgun into the air. The constant threat and unpredictability would make anyone anxious and on high alert. You'd be investing in earplugs and a good therapist, wouldn't you? The stress and anxiety of living under such conditions would be overwhelming for anyone. But the real sticking point for Japan? The abductions. This issue strikes at the heart of many Japanese families and remains a deeply emotional and unresolved matter. Back in the 1970s and 80s, North Korea decided it needed a few Japanese tutors, and by tutors I mean citizens to kidnap and force to teach their spies about Japanese culture. These abductions have left scars that are still felt today. It was a whole thing. The Japanese government has made numerous attempts to resolve this issue, but it remains a significant point of contention. So, yeah, Japan and North Korea aren't exactly exchanging friendship bracelets anytime soon. The relationship is fraught with tension, mistrust, and unresolved issues that continue to impact both nations. Now let's talk about China, North Korea's closest ally and the metaphorical adult in the room whenever Kim Jong-un starts throwing a tantrum. China has long been seen as the stabilizing force in the region, the one who steps in to calm things down when North Korea's actions become too erratic. But even the most patient parent has their limits, and China is starting to reach theirs. The Chinese leadership, including President Xi Jinping, has been increasingly showing signs of frustration. It's not just the leadership, the general public in China is also growing weary of North Korea's unpredictable behavior. The constant need to manage the fallout from North Korea's actions is taking its toll. It's like that friend who always bails you out of jail, only to have you immediately rob another convenience store. At some point, you've got to draw the line. China is increasingly finding itself in this exact situation. The relationship is becoming strained, and China is starting to question how much longer they can continue to support North Korea without significant changes. China's walking a tightrope here. On one hand, they need North Korea as a buffer zone between them and US influence in South Korea. This geopolitical buffer is crucial for China's strategic interests. It's like that awkward patch of grass between you and your neighbor's property. Nobody really wants it, but it's there and it prevents a direct confrontation. This buffer zone helps maintain a delicate balance of power in the region. On the other hand, North Korea's antics are starting to make China look bad. The international community is watching, and China's association with North Korea is becoming a liability. Imagine hosting a dinner party, and your weird cousin shows up, starts juggling live hand grenades, and then demands everyone sing karaoke. You love your cousin, you really do, but you're also secretly hoping they'll get abducted by aliens before dessert. This is the dilemma China faces. They need North Korea for strategic reasons, but the cost of this relationship is becoming increasingly hard to justify. The world is watching, and China's patience is wearing thin. The future of this complex relationship remains uncertain, and only time will tell how China will navigate these turbulent waters. One thing is clear. The dynamics between China and North Korea are shifting, and the world is paying close attention. As China continues to weigh its options, the international community watches closely, waiting to see what the next move will be in this high-stakes game of diplomacy. The stakes are high, and the outcome is far from certain. The world waits with bated breath, hoping for a resolution that brings stability to the region. Until then, the tightrope walk continues, with China carefully balancing its interests and its frustrations. The future of this relationship is uncertain, but one thing is for sure. The world will be watching every step of the way. As the dynamics evolve, the global community remains on edge, anticipating the next chapter in this complex saga. The stakes are high, and the world is watching closely, hoping for a peaceful resolution. You might be surprised to see Australia on this list. After all, they're known for their laid-back attitude, love of surfing, and venomous creatures that can kill you with a single drop of venom. But when it comes to North Korea, even the land of she'll be right mate draws the line. See, Australia might be geographically distant, but they take global security seriously. It's like that friend who lives across the country but always calls you out when you're being a jerk. They might not be directly affected, but they're not afraid to tell you you're being a right plonker. Australia's stance on North Korea is simple. Stop being a right nuisance. They've consistently condemned the nuclear program because, let's be honest, nobody needs more nukes in the world. And the human rights abuses? Yeah, Australia's not a fan of those either. Chapter 6. The United Kingdom. Stiff upper lip, stern words. Let's be honest, the United Kingdom has a long and storied history of dealing with, shall we say, difficult countries. So it's no surprise that they're not exactly fans of North Korea's antics. Imagine having to deal with centuries of international drama, only to have a country the size of Yorkshire decide it wants to play nuclear chicken with the world. You'd be forgiven for rolling your eyes and reaching for another cup of tea. The UK, much like their American cousins across the pond, are firmly in the condemn the nukes, criticize the human rights camp. They've supported various international sanctions because sometimes you need to hit a regime where it hurts. The pocketbook. But the UK also understands that diplomacy is key. They're not afraid to stand up for what they believe in, but they'd rather do it with a well-placed word than a strongly worded tweet. Chapter 7. Canada, politely firm, firmly against. Ah, Canada, the land of maple syrup, hockey, and apologizing for things that aren't your fault. But even the nicest people have their limits, and when it comes to North Korea, Canada's inner sorry not sorry starts to shine through. It's like that friend who's always agreeable, but you know not to mess with their Tim Hortons order. Canada's stance on North Korea is pretty straightforward. They're not fans. They've imposed sanctions because even the most forgiving soul has to draw the line somewhere. And they've called for multilateral action because dealing with a rogue state is a team sport, and Canada's always up for a good team effort. But let's be real, Canada's real superpower is passive aggressiveness. They're not going to yell and scream and threaten to turn Pyongyang into a parking lot. Chapter 8. Germany, a history of unification, a future of opposition. Last but not least we have Germany, a country that knows a thing or two about reunification. And while they're all for a good kumbaya moment, they're not about to let North Korea off the hook that easily. It's like that friend who went through a messy breakup and is now extremely cautious about anyone who even remotely resembles their ex. Germany's stance on North Korea is pretty clear. Get your act together. They've condemned the nuclear tests, the missile launches, the human rights violations, the whole shebang. And they've done it with the same unwavering determination they bring to assembling IKEA furniture. As a key member of the European Union, Germany's got some serious diplomatic weight to throw around. So, while Germany might not be leading the charge against North Korea, they're definitely a force to be reckoned with. And there you have it, folks, a whirlwind tour of the countries that have North Korea at the top of their do not invite list. It's a complicated web of geopolitics, historical grievances, and enough nuclear tension to make a Geiger counter blush. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Let us know in the comments which country you think has the most significant impact on North Korea's international relations. See you next time.